Well, welcome everybody. I think we'll get things kicked off. My name's Justin Otzi. I'm a planner with ARDC. I also serve as Executive Director with the North Shore Scenic Drive Council. Part of that council's mission is looking to make improvements to the waysides along the 61 Scenic Byway corridor. Main focus on that is accessibility, educational aspects and safety improvements, but also preserving the aesthetics and culture of integrity along the byway. A little bit of background, or I think to start off with, we'll just introduce ourselves, go around the room, kind of say why you're here or who you're representing, go from there.
Andy Hubley with ARDC, work with Justin and work closely with the Gitchi-Gami Trail Association and the folks involved with the trail.
John Wytanis, I'm a resident of Tofte. I've been interested in the trail. What's going on with it?
Lauren Webb, I work for the Sawtooth Mountain Clinic on the Moving Matters project, and we were working on a couple different things in Cook County, but mainly to make it safer and more accessible to walk and bike, and we are kind of interested in helping any way we can with community engagement or other things might be helpful.
I work with Marin at the clinic, and I'm a biker who would love to use the trail.
I'm Barb Gervais, the Tofte clerk.
John Nelson, I kind of do the park maintenance down here.
I'm Mark Reddingen. I work with the DNR Parks and Trails out of Two Harbors. One of my jobs is the Gitchi-Gami Trail coordinator. So.
And I'm Gary Hansen, and I just got elected in here.
David Munson with the park, on the park board at Tofte here.
I'm Ron Ankeny. I'm an architect out of St. Paul with a cabin 6 miles that way.
CJ Fernandez, Landscape Architect.
Great. Well, I thought I'd start off by just giving a little bit of history as to how we got here tonight. Started off, there had been some planning previously through the Scenic Drive Council, looking at improvements, both general and accessibility wise throughout all the waysides. That next step of planning ended up being engaging with stakeholders to try to actually implement some of these changes and improvements. So that it started off in February, met with the steering committee. We looked at all 65 waysides and narrowed them down to about 5 or 6 that we thought could really benefit the most from these improvements. We were at the time targeting one design project that we were trying to get through, meet with stakeholders, see what we would be able to implement, had the best chance of actually getting a project done. So we got down to those 5 and went away, kind of met again on that specific side of things and got some input from CJ, and then decided to go out and contact all the stakeholders. Tofte Park was one of them. Got in touch with Barb and Paul James and set up, I think it was in June or something around there, maybe a little bit later in the summer. It was later in the summer actually. But anyways, met down at the park and had a great turnout and really heard about the enthusiasm of the park and how important it is to the community of Tofte, and really saw just a great opportunity to enhance it and just broaden out the accessibility of having that place or being able to use that place. So that was one of 4 really good meetings that we ended up having on those kind of power pack days going up the shore, and had some really engaged stakeholders. So I came back and told Andy that we're going to have a really tough time narrowing this thing down to just one, and I don't want to kick, it was really hard to kick one out because of the opportunities we identified, and that's where we kind of got to work and trying to put things together to see if we could broaden this project out a little bit more. Worked with CJ, we put together some scopes of work kind of outlining all of the projects. Tofte itself was a little unique where we had this Gitchi-Gami Trail coming through, planned, some funding available, and secured, and just with the area, they seem to sort of are going to correspond with one another and interrelate. So that's kind of where that side of things took place. We got a bit of a number on what the cost was going to be, and we worked, the funding we had initially was federal funding through DOT and coastal grant program funding. IRRB, we seeked out to be able to help close that funding gap, and also a contribution from ARDC and the Gitchi-Gami Trail Association as well was looking to scope this side of it and contributed, so we were able to move forward with the project. So that's how we got here this evening, which is an exciting time. I think we're looking into the evening tonight just to talk about the project a little bit. They are going to be tracking on 2 separate focus conversations, both first on the park and then on the Gitchi-Gami Trail. Clearly there's going to be some cross-hatching, but it's just kind of easier to be able to gather input, which is a big focus of tonight, to get resources from the existing conditions, talk to the people, talk to the locals who have a greater knowledge than we do, for CJ to be able to kind of compile things back. And looking at the project scope, usually these things take about a 3-meeting process, where tonight we meet, put a steering committee together whose role will be meeting here and giving these looking over the recommendations once they get presented, and giving feedback, getting this existing conditions information. Take that tonight, and that's where CJ will work up some initial design ideas and scoping ideas for the trail as well. And that next meeting we'll be able to come back to gather some feedback on those ideas. Be able to something that you don't want whatsoever, we can completely kick out, or maybe there's something that we really want to have, and that's a real sticking point that we want to have as part of a plan going forward. And that's where take that information back, and then one final public presentation of that finalized idea, and then any kind of feedback or minor changes that happen after that we can do, certainly. So that's kind of where that steering committee is going to be guiding that going forward. Talking about public involvement, and we're definitely going to have that wide open to the public throughout all of the meeting process. We're filming tonight, thanks to Moving Matters, to be able to have this kind of information up and available for the public. So maybe you weren't able to attend tonight, but still can kind of have an idea of what the project is going forward. Talking about deliverables, at the end of the project, I'll be looking at a report that outlines both the meeting processes, summaries from all the meetings, as well as outlining the design concept that we're going forward with, detailing the amenities, kiosk and interpretive opportunities, educational aspects to it as well. And that usually puts us in a good position to start seeking grant funding to be able to actually implement those going forward. So that's where that deliverables is getting to that report, and that's the end of this project. But the goals of the project are a little bit greater. It's a little different with Gitchi-Gami, with some funding already in place. But here is where trying to identify a group and a champion to be able to take this idea and move forward with it, to try to implement that change specifically to the park, is really the big sticking point that I'm trying to get to tonight, and through this process really. There's already an engaged parks board, and we've talked about that and a desire to improve that place. So I think there is a little bit of organization around and already on the ground and organized to move forward with that. But that's a big part of coming together, trying to get public input and get a vision for an asset in the community that everybody is willing to move forward with. And you look at, for example, Beaver Bay Trailhead was a recent local community effort where the city was able to work together, take on the maintenance and ownership of that to be able to seek implementation. CJ worked on that. It's kind of a similar tracking process. Really puts us in a good position. ARDC will be available to help in some manner of seeking for that grant assistance. We can work on that relationship once we get through this process, certainly. But so then looking forward at a timeline a little bit, meeting here tonight in early February. Our next meeting, I think we're tracking about late April, maybe early May. We're kind of seeing how that shakes out. We won't have that lined up tonight, just as this project has taken on a couple moving pieces. There's just a little more complexity on scheduling things. But that late April is where we're really targeting right now. And then again, finishing up in probably late June or early July, probably a 5 to 6 month overall time frame that we're looking at. So then I think we can transfer into the conversation unless CJ, you had any other input or other people had questions on the process or history of the project at all.
What I was wondering, it might be a question for Andy too, but just a little background on the trail component and the wayside piece.
The trail component.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, there's a gap in the trail between its current terminus by the Forest Service building and on the east end of town. And it's a priority of the Gitchi-Gami Trail Association and others, obviously, to get that gap fixed. The DNR applied for funding, federal funding last year, and it was awarded. So there's $750,000 committed, $600 by the feds, and then the DNR has to commit $150 to make that $750. So the money technically is there. There's always a chance the feds could take it away by changing the rules and stuff, but the last time that happened, the state made it up and just filled in the gap. So, and that's the only time it's ever happened. So we're very confident that money's in place, and that would be for a construction in the summer of 2018. So once that money got into place, then we knew we had to get in design mode as soon as possible, because 2018 comes faster than you think it was. So federal funded projects have a lot more paperwork, and as we were talking about on the walk, there may be some different rules and things that we have to follow. The trail will have to be 10 feet wide and paved, otherwise it won't qualify for the funding.
What's the 10 feet wide? That isn't the walking area, is it?
Yes.
Is it?
10 feet of bituminous, yeah.
I didn't think the bike path was 10 feet wide, but.
It is in most spots. It used to be 8 feet wide. That we built a few 8 foot wide ones.
I think in front of the Forest Service was 8 feet,
Oh, is that right?
but most of it is.
Yeah.
Okay,
And they may allow 8 feet in certain situations.
all right, I was gonna say,
But-
because I walked it and I know it wasn't 10 feet wide, but anyway.
Most of the pavers are now 10 feet wide too, so it's actually not any cheaper to build an 8 foot wide trail generally, because they have to go find a paver to do it.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. There you go.
So that was the history of why this trail process needed to be done. And the wayside, was part of the North Shore Scenic Drive initiative, like Justin talked about. Does that answer your question, CJ?
I think so.
Okay.
Your slides, or did
I
you have
can do it.
anything?
No, I don't have any other questions. So the what we're doing tonight and what I'll be doing is we're starting a process, and the way it works, or the way we hope it works, is that we're basically coming to the table without any specific ideas. That locals are essentially local experts, so your opinions and knowledge and things that information you can add to any type of change or designs that would be implemented are critical. As they're mentioning, that the project has kind of got two major prongs to it. We'll talk about Tofte Park tonight and also the trail route. And after tonight, so you could kind of think of today as sort of programming. After tonight, we'll come in with options and start to talk about what works. The way we like to run the process is when we show up with some options, it's really wide open. If we need to start over, we start over. If things aren't working, if we've hit on some things in one option, some on the other, that's the process, and we move forward and start to combine things. And the goal really is to get to some solutions that have support with the public and the local public. The projects are very different, and the park is somewhat of a different type of animal. Looking at the changes there, which was started with ADA improvements, but then also looking at just repurposing the park or starting to make renovations to it. A project like that and the process in getting to a design that is also supported is critical for pursuing future funding. The most recent example of that was the Caribou Falls Wayside. There's a process very similar to this, meetings, a lot of input, a series of revisions, and funding was pursued for that project. And so that's how these things take on a life of their own. It's not intended, and what we're doing is not delivering a construction document. It's very much a concept. To the degree we have, we don't have a survey, but the degree to which we've got good data, and here we have actually really good base information we can design on, so we can get into the weeds a bit and produce some very realistic, applicable design. We do have topo available, so we almost have kind of a survey level base information to work over. So that really what it does is it creates a very compelling application at the end of the day, where we have vetted design, public support, and in a case if there is not money sitting around for improvements and you're going to different funding sources, you've got a project history that supports it. So that's the real sort of 10,000 foot down quick summary of where we end up with the work. Today being really kind of that first programming meeting. So kind of everything's on the table. This isn't much of a presentation, more just some imagery to spur some thought, and how just talk a little bit about how things have changed. Break this up again. So this is just basically shows what we were talking about. There is, and the Tofte Park location is here. The red is where the trail essentially stops, coming from both ends. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with that. This is the section of existing trail that kind of blisters off the highway. And part of this project and part of our trail project is looking at a trail access wayside, a place where you can essentially stop and look at the lake. And there is some interest in providing access down to the water in there and see if it can be done. So part of the trail concepts will also be looking at some site design and potential kind of foot traffic, trail routing to get down. And I think that the thinking is we're going to take a hard look at the topography and see where it might be possible, and on the next visit we'll start to field verify where that might make the best sense. So we'll be looking at that as well. That's called the Marshall Trail Wayside piece. So that's kind of the third component of what we're doing. So geographically, that kind of frames where we are. I did a little bit of digging and found some aerials. That's Tofte. These were from 1938, I believe. So it gives you a sense as to what was there. Obviously, a lot of the road infrastructure that we were looking at is still there today, but it's very different. The docks still have blow-up views. You can see the structures and the different character of the place, and this kind of takes us down into the park. And the thing is, you all know that when we get into the trail route, this is as we get towards that bay, it gets pretty tight, and so trying to figure out where that trail's going to be, will be a big part of the process. The dock and what these places are about, as I'm sure you know, that kind of an interesting thing that I'd come across before was how people came to these places. It's a very different world today than it used to be without a road, and arriving at places by boat is a real different experience. A lot of that is lost today, and something I've been very interested in. I spent a number of years commercial fishing and arrived at a lot of places by boat that had no access. And it makes a place kind of special, unique. But here you can get from Duluth to Tofte, for $2.85 back in 1928. And then just so we got some other images. This is, I believe, from the late 70s. A different view. You can start to see how some of this area is beginning to change. A little closer view. I think some of the dock is at least underwater at that point. So it gives you a sense kind of this area too. We're gonna be focusing, I think, a lot of the trail discussion on how to get it through there. So, so anyhow, some food for thought on some of these resources. And then just some, again, a little closer view. This map is actually on the tables in front of everybody. So part of tonight, we'll sort of play it by ear, but depending on the size of the group, we wanted to get some specific feedback from people and mark up some of these aerial photos to get thoughts. This is, again, is one that's on your table as well. This is a blow up of the wayside. It's not on the table. It gives you a better view as to what the conditions are of that stretch of trail, and potentially this is the area that stop would happen along the trail. So we'll be looking at some options for that at the next meeting.
That area is owned by MnDOT. It's publicly owned.
Between the trail and the highway?
Yeah. About the lake.
To the lake, yeah. So the program right now is a bit open, but it is to provide a place to stop, get off the trail and view the lake, and also get onto a secondary trail to take you down to the water's edge.
That photo must be fairly old, actually. MnDOT now has a giant gravel pit, or a pit on the other side of the road.
So and then obviously a lot of you are obviously familiar with these images, but just a reminder of what it looks like when everything's green. And the park location and some of the features that we looked at today, the shoreline. And obviously some of the unique character pieces, amenities that are in the park, the structure, which has been part of some discussion, some of the other resources here.